Hey everyone. Here at the Center for Conscious Caregiving, we are attempting to raise our individual and group awareness about emotions. And so we are going to do our Unstuffing Emotions class each month. We're going to delve into one emotion and try and give you some information about the gifts of that emotion and what messages they bring. We believe that conscious caregivers do not react to life stressors, but instead respond, making choices, decisions, and taking actions that can benefit themselves without harming others or the environment. So, in order to be a conscious caregiver, we have to be self-aware, and emotions are a big part of our self-awareness. We definitely live in a culture that is not emotion friendly. It really doesn't give us a lot of space to express our emotions freely. We end up having to repress or suppress a lot of our emotional states, which is not good for our entire well-being. So that's a very difficult culture for us to live in. And so in order for us to really be conscious caregivers, we have to start to understand our emotions. So this is an intro PowerPoint presentation that we have for you. And each month we are going to do a specific emotion. And our hope is to give you information and practices that you can work with each month to start to lean into your emotions, to start to make friends with your emotions, and realize that they are not so bad, that there are definite gifts to having these emotions, and to use them to make our decisions and take actions rather than overreacting to information that comes in. So let's go into what are emotions? What are some of the definitions about emotions? Merriam-Webster says emotion is the affective aspect of consciousness. It's a state of feeling. Candace Pert wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion in the 90s, I think. And she defined emotions as neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters provide information on a biological level. I'm sure you've all heard of neurotransmitters of some sort. They are molecules in our body that bring information into our nervous system. They move from synapse to synapse, bringing information. Antonio Damasio brought that definition a little bit. It's pretty much the same. They are neurotransmitters, but he called them action requiring neurological programs. So basically what he's saying is that these neurotransmitters, the message that they're bringing requires us to take some sort of action. That's the purpose of the emotion. They are requiring us to take some sort of action. He also says that in order to have self-awareness or relational awareness, personal, interpersonal awareness, that emotions are absolutely required. So when we're stuffing them, what we're really doing is not allowing ourselves to get to know ourselves, and we're certainly not able to participate fully in relationships. Now, Carla McLaren, she recently wrote a book, Language of Emotions, and she took these definitions a little bit further. She speaks about how emotions arrive in different levels of intensity, and each delivers a message to invoke, again, a specific action. She says the three different levels of intensity, that there's a flowing state, that the neurotransmitters, the emotions, are moving through our body, and they're basically monitoring the environment. You can't really feel them. They're just there, like little sentries running around your body, and you can't really identify them until you go into a mood state. And once in a mood state, that's when you actually can feel the emotion. and you may be able to feel it in someone else. Then there's the third state, which she calls the intense state, which is highly activated. You're not just angry, you are raging. So that's an intense state of anger. So those are the different levels of intensity that McLaren has identified. And basically, emotions really, they are chemicals. They're molecules, and these chemicals send messages to our body. And our body is supposed to respond to these chemical messengers, oftentimes with a stress response or a relaxation response. Either way, we're supposed to be taking an action. An action is required. So, for example, fear would require you to take action to prepare and ready yourself for change. Anger requires you to take action to protect or restore your sense of self. Sadness requires you to take action to let go of something that is not working anyway. By understanding the message that they bring, I think it's going to be helpful for us to then allow the emotion in, to feel it fully, and then take the action that's necessary for each emotion. So that's why each month we're going to talk about a different emotion and do some practices to get to know that emotion. So let's talk a little bit about emotional awareness. There's definitions. Let's start with emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize one's own emotions, to be able to discriminate between different feelings and label them appropriately, and then use that emotional information to guide thinking and behavior. So there's a lot in there. In order to be emotionally intelligent, first you have to recognize your emotion. You have to actually be able to identify that you are in an emotional state. Then you have to be able to differentiate between all the different emotions and be able to label it appropriately. Then you're able to use that information to guide your behavior and your actions. And again, I don't think in our society, in our culture, that we are recognizing our own emotional states. I'm not sure that, when I turn on the news and I watch what's going on, I don't think we're recognizing our emotional states. I don't think we're discriminating our feelings and able to label them appropriately. There's a lot of angry people out there that I'm not sure they recognize just how angry they are. And to be able to then use the emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, well, again, I'm not seeing that. There's too much in the news right now that leads me to believe that we don't have these abilities. And that's why I think it's important that we start to check in and we start to develop a skill set and an emotional intelligence. So, because emotions, when you are able to feel into them, and you do know what their message are, you can guide thinking and behavior. You don't have to react, you can respond, and that's really important. Empathy is a social and emotional skill that helps us to feel and understand the emotions, circumstances, intentions, thoughts, and needs of others, such that we can offer sensitive, perceptive, and appropriate communication and support. I think I'll say that again because I'm not sure everybody understands empathy. It's a social and emotional skill, all right? So it's a skill that helps us to feel and understand the emotions, circumstances, intentions, thoughts, and needs of others, such that we can offer sensitive, perceptive, and appropriate communication and support. I am a nurse. This is considered to be one of these innate qualities that nurses bring to the table, that we can use our empathy in order to build our relationships with others. My experience, though, is that it's not just an innate quality, that it is a skill. It has to be developed. It must be practiced. And and utilized, again, to offer that sensitive, appropriate communication and support. And if we don't know our own emotions, if we can't discriminate between feelings and label them appropriately, if we can't even discern what is ours and someone else's, then we cannot use empathy. We aren't using that skill set. So for many of us that are caregivers or in customer service or in teaching, wherever, healthcare, if we can't use empathy as a skill set, then we have a deficit in our practice. So what's next here? What's an empath? An empath is someone who is aware that he or she reads emotions, nuance, subtext, undercurrent, intentions, thought, social space, interactions, relational behaviors, body language, and gestural language. It's someone who's aware that they can actually pick up on all of this information that comes when you're in relationship with someone. Sometimes we're not aware of that. And I think for a lot of people that gets us very confused. People who are aware that they can pick up on other people's emotions and really read their body language and see the underlying messages that are going on between people that are in conversation. That is an empath. But quite honestly, because we are not really an emotionally intelligent society, even though we're born with empathic skills, we're not taught how to recognize them and how to use them appropriately. A hyper-empath is someone who reads these things to a greater degree than deemed normal. And that's someone who oftentimes may have difficulty in crowds and being out in large groups of people because they can pick up on so much of this information. And unless they become comfortable with their own emotional states, it's going to be very difficult for them to be comfortable with the states of other people. Oftentimes, as we become more self-aware, more conscious, our innate empathic abilities strengthen. So again, if you've not become emotionally intelligent about your own emotional states, it's going to be very difficult when you're picking up on other people's states. So it's going to be an uncomfortable thing for you. Again, another reason, especially for caregivers, because again, we're in relationship. That's what we're doing, is we caregive. And if the person we're caregiving for is angry or sad or jealous or upset, and we're picking up on all that, and we're having a hard time dealing with that, it's probably because we haven't dealt with it in our own self. So what are your emotions telling you? Being able to discern and manage your emotions, again, is a skill set. It's all part of empathy. We need to be able to learn and practice being able to feel our emotions and then being able to respond by taking the appropriate required action without harming self, other, or the environment. Real important, taking the appropriate action. So knowing what that message for each one of these is going to be important for us to be able to take the appropriate response. And we'll go into that. Well, let's look at what Carla McLaren says about emotions. Emotions are yours. The messages are yours. Nobody else can make you feel anything. So understand that nobody makes you feel angry. Nobody makes you feel sad or guilty. Those emotions are yours. They are messages. Whatever the message is, they are for you. And for us to really own them and take the appropriate action. There's a lot of blaming about how we feel, and there's no reason for that. Emotions are totally ours. Emotions are always true. They always tell us the truth about how we are feeling, but they may not always be right or appropriate in each situation. All right, so think about that. They're valid. What I'm feeling, if I'm feeling angry, is valid. That is definitely how I feel. But whether or not it's the correct emotion for the situation, that has to be evaluated, because it may not. There may be a lot of information that I don't have yet that is leading me to feel angry, but it may not bright or be appropriate. So it behooves us to, again, get to know our emotions very intimately so that we can know when we can trust them or when to be like, wait, let me see, I might need a little more information about this. And as you get to know your emotions, again, you don't react. You'll be able to respond. You'll be able to take your time and say, you know what? I need to collect more information. Something's missing. Emotions are not positive or negative. They are information. They are energy. That is it. Not positive, not negative. And I want you to think about our sensation of hunger. Is it good or bad? There's no good or bad to it. For us, it's a signal. If I feel hunger, it's a signal that I need to take action and go get something to eat, right? Same thing with thirst. Nothing good or bad about it. It's just a signal that I need to drink. My body is telling me I need to do something in order to get my body hydrated. So emotions are very similar. The feelings are neither good or bad. They're signals, and they want us to take some sort of action. Once we become more conscious of what that signal is, then we can readily make the appropriate action. And there's no good or bad about it. There's no blaming. The feeling itself will dissipate as soon as we take the action, just like it does when we eat something or when we drink something. Again, there's specific messages with each, and each month we're going to be looking at what that emotion is. When we suppress emotions, they don't just go away. They get stuck in our bodies and can pop up when least expected. So, and again, we are not a society that teaches us. We don't have a lot of role models about really good communication of our emotions. So most of us in our childhood, we started suppressing things. So if they get stuck, know that they pop up, and it's going to be a repeated pattern. Things are going to trigger us in order for these things to pop up, and that gives us the chance to heal. When we overexpress our emotions, they can invade other people's space and boundaries. We have to be really careful when you've got those road ragers, again, out there driving around like lunatics. They're putting other people's lives in danger simply because they're having an emotional reaction. Okay? That's an overexpression of an emotion, and they're invading other people's space and potentially harming others. We don't want to do that. It's not our place. Again, our emotions are messengers for us. We're supposed to take that information, use it, and take appropriate actions. And one of the inappropriate actions is to invade someone else's space with it and invade someone else's boundaries with it. Another thing is emotions tend to overlap and feed off one another. So one of the reasons it's difficult for some of us to label our emotions is that sometimes they show up in clusters. They show up as there may be 2 or 3 emotional states that you're in at one time. So learning to discern just what exactly I am feeling and where I'm feeling can be challenging because they travel in packs. So just be aware, and we'll talk about that when we talk about certain emotions, because sometimes they don't tend to travel alone. They travel in packs. Brene Brown taught us that you cannot self-select your emotions. If you choose to numb out, which is what a lot of us do, if we're feeling uncomfortable, we're really angry, we're really, well, that's going to be time for us to grab a drink, or to grab the ice cream, or to grab the joint, or whatever it is that will help to numb that feeling out because it's so uncomfortable. The problem is that you can't self-select. When you numb out, and you're trying to numb out fear, anger, or sadness, you're going to be numbing out joy, contentment, or gratitude. You don't get to pick and choose which emotion you get to numb out. You are numbing all of them. And so you numb out the really positive, joyful emotions when you try to numb out the negative emotions. So I guess what we're really trying to get you to be able to do using knowledge and practice is be able to lean into those uncomfortable emotions. And as soon as you take the action, they start to dissipate. Throwing our emotions out creates shadows. For most of us, when we were children, our emotional states can be very overwhelming and very, very scary. So it's not unusual that we may try to throw our emotions out in a sense when we're children. And what that really means is that we've just repressed them. We've suppressed them and put them so far out of our awareness that we really aren't aware, that we don't see that emotion in ourselves. And these emotions never leave our self system. So they will continue to affect our responses, our choices, and our decision making. All right. And this generally starts to happen in childhood because, again, emotions are so visceral and can be so overwhelming to children. So when we create shadows, when we've suppressed something that's so completely out of our awareness, this can cause a dissonance in our energy fields. Our awareness, our attention, and our intentions and our behaviors become completely out of sync. We say and do things that are not aligned with our core values. That's a sign of shadows. And our goal is to be getting those emotions back. Retrieving them from our subconscious is really a necessary part of our healing and of making ourselves whole. This is how we really begin to make conscious decisions and take conscious action and to be able to consciously serve others. So we talked about how shadows are emotional elements that are out of our awareness. And I want to be clear, not all emotions are shadows. They may perfectly well be in our awareness, and we are very well aware of the fact that we're feeling them. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, we did not learn how to adequately express them. So for many of us, dealing with emotions is going to be all about learning how to be able to listen and to communicate effectively. So when you're learning with each emotion each month, you're learning to process each one of these emotions and really embrace it. Hopefully you will also be learning how to communicate your emotions to others effectively and also be able to listen to others when they communicate their emotions. And when I'm speaking about communications, communication and listening, I'm speaking about more than just using your ears and your mouth. I'm speaking about whole person communication. Listening to someone with your whole self, communicating with someone with your whole self. And that's not easy, and it needs practice. But that is hopefully some of what you're going to be learning over the course of this year as we go through each emotion. And the more you start using various self-care practices that we're going to be teaching you, it will get easier and easier with each emotion. Now for those, again, those emotional states that we have pushed out of our awareness and that they have become shadows, there are other specific practices, and we're going to be utilizing some of those. Let's see. So how can we begin to recognize? Let's first start with just how do we recognize a potential shadow in our life? Because again, shadows usually are behind us. We can't usually see them. So how would we recognize when they might be influencing us? And the bottom line usually to recognizing a shadow is starting to recognize when you are hypersensitive to something, when you're having a reaction to something that's a bit over the top. When you're negatively hypersensitive, easily triggered, reactive, irritated, angry, hurt, or upset, and we can be upset about something. But when I'm talking about hypersensitive, usually the other people in the room may not be quite as affected as you are, but you're up on your soapbox, you're on a rant, is usually a hypersensitive situation. It can also be something that's really an emotional overtone or mood that pervades your life. It's a pattern. It's something that all these things are something that happen on a regularity. Certain things will trigger you. So no, it's that over the top reaction that you're having. And it's not just to negative feelings. It can also be positive feelings. So your shadows do not have to, we always are so afraid we're going to have to feel anger, we're going to have to feel jealousy, or no, it can be, you can have positive emotions that are out of your awareness. And how do you know about those? That's when you're positively hypersensitive. And that shows up when you are easily infatuated, possessive, obsessed, overly attracted, or perhaps it's, again, that ongoing idealization that structures your motivations or your mood. So when someone else is just, you have this ideal concept of them, excuse me, and you just think that they are all that. So you got people who are following celebrities around. Maybe it's a sports figure or an actress or whoever. But for whatever reason, they have qualities that you idealize. And what's really happening might be is that you have those qualities, but you don't see them in yourself. You're seeing them more in this other person. So those positive qualities can be shadows too, which is very interesting. And we will be doing some practices to deal specifically with those negative shadows and with those positive shadows. But know ultimately that they're overreactions. And so we call that hypersensitivity. We call it a trigger. So let's talk about triggers. Okay, so those things that we can't see or that we're not aware of, but we know we're ultra sensitive to, they're called triggers. So let's take a look at triggers. Triggers can be activated internally or externally. Basically meaning internally, you can just wake up in a mood or some thought in your head starts triggering some emotional response inside. Maybe it came from a dream, but it's something inside subjective to you that is activating you to start to have a response. External, you could walk into the Home Depot and the cash register person reminds you of Aunt Martha that drove you crazy as a kid. Or you just meet some stranger that you just take an instant dislike to without any real explanation for it. But you know, everything that comes out of their mouth, it's like fingernails on a blackboard and you're not quite sure. Triggers have absolutely nothing to do with the present situation or the present person. All right. So the cash register person, they are not your real, they are just your trigger. They are activating a response in you, but they aren't the cause of that response in you. The person, situation, or event onto whom which a trigger is being projected is seen as the cause. Okay, so we place blame on the person or the event that they are causing our emotional response. But once again, they have nothing to really do with this response. This is a misperception, and our job is to clear up that misperception. All right, what is the real thing that I'm upset about? What is the real thing that maybe I'm angry about or I'm jealous about? If it's not this person or this situation, then what situation is it? What person is it really? The thing about triggers is they are not objective at all. It's a very subjective experience. So once you're in the throes of a trigger, it's a whole feeling state, and it's not something that is rational. All right, so if you've got somebody who's really having an extraordinary trigger response, such as that road rager that's zooming through traffic in and out like a crazy person, objective communication with that person is not going to work in those circumstances. They are in the midst of a subjective experience. They are having a reaction, and you're not going to be able to talk to them logically or rationally until they are already calmed down in a better place. And a lot of us can, I'm sure, relate to this. There have been times when I've just kind of gone off. Something just totally maybe put me into some sort of state, and of course, worst would be, to have my husband looking at me and being really calm about it and being like, and not joining into my drama. And that sometimes only made it worse. So just understand that when you're in the midst of a trigger, sometimes that emotional response, you need time to calm down and then try to logically talk to the person. So some steps to dealing with triggers. First one is right now, set an intention to start to be aligned for healing and to learn how to recognize your triggers. As soon as you set an intention that you want to find these triggers, you want to recognize them, and you want to heal them, the universe is going to respond in kind to you. And how they're going to respond in kind is by presenting situations in which you can get triggered. The only way you're going to learn to recognize your triggers is when they're happening. So it's an experiential exercise. So you don't get to sit on the sidelines and not have the experience and know it's going to be, something's going to trigger you. And in the moment, you're going to have to kind of have that flash recognition and say, wait a minute, this isn't the cash register person. This isn't, my boss. This isn't my sister. This is something else. And as soon as you start to recognize that, that's when you can put distance between it and yourself. That's when you can start to be more objective about it. Also recognizing when you're starting to go into one of these states that you're expressing the unevolved child consciousness through the trigger. Most of these things, again, things happened when we were children. And if the child hasn't had a chance to express it or process through it, then that unevolved part of ourselves is the one that's coming through and having the meltdown for us, having that tantrum for us. So again, recognizing that that part of ourselves needs to be healed can help you to stand back away from it. Triggers are over-exaggerated, over-the-top reactions that we have to people or situations. So, and the only way to deal with them is to go inward. You are going to have to learn to separate yourself from the trigger, and you're going to have to learn some self-care practices, and you're going to have to go deep into yourself in order to heal that. And for a lot of us, that's a really scary realm to go in. If you find yourself, you have been triggered, or you're recognizing someone else is in the midst of a trigger, you want to excuse yourself from the conversation. That's the best way to start to break yourself away. Find some reason to leave the situation. You have to get up to go to the bathroom. You need to go get a drink of water. Anything to go give yourself a couple of deep breaths. And again, you're trying to separate yourself from the trigger. If you really have to, then you can find an excuse to leave, get in the car, pack up and go, and give yourself space in order to be able to do that. You may even, if this is something that's been habitual, if every Thanksgiving Aunt Martha drives you right out of your mind, and you know you're going to be set up potentially for a trigger, sometimes it's good to have some sort of signal that you can cut out early. So that high sign that you're going to give family or friends. The other thing is when there is a conflict and you know when someone's having an overreaction, they're really over the top, don't block the doorway. Don't pick up anything. It's time to exit. It's time to get out of the way because, again, someone's in a subjective experience. There's no rational thought going on at the time. You want to wait until things cool down in order to try and have that rational conversation. So, just so to give you a little more information about what's going to be coming, each month we're going to be discussing a different emotion. And we're going to be letting you know the gifts of that emotion and suggesting practices. We'll also be giving you references for you to read and probably videos for you that you can check out. As you start to bring your emotional states back into your awareness and out of your shadows, your perceptions become much more trustworthy. Your choices are more stable, and there will be less and less reactive situations, which basically means less drama that you're going to have to deal with in your life. So while most people can tell you that it is work to go digging into these emotions, I can tell you personally that the outcome is amazing because there's so much less drama in your life once you start looking into the emotions. We're going to be presenting these classes in an online format, so you don't have to truck yourself to the center. And we're going to be using Zoom in order to do them. So you will receive a link to attend to the class. So if you want to register for the class, you'll receive a link in your email so that you can attend the class. Classes will be recorded so that if you are unavailable at the time that we're actually doing the class, that's fine because you'll be able to access the class at your convenience. And the schedule is right on the slide. So we have the different dates and we have the specific emotions that we're going to be going into each month. Right now, the classes are going to be $10 each. And if you wanted, you could get all 12 for $100. So you can be able to pay for that as you register for the class online. If anyone has any questions, just call the center, 732-864-5508, or email us at info@thecenterforconsciouscaregiving.org. Thanks. Hey guys, just so you know, here are references for anything I put in our slides today. So you may want to check out, there's TED Talks, there's a Huffington Post blog, and if you've never seen the movie Inside Out from Disney, it's amazing. And if you sit and consciously watch, it'll give you a lot of wonderful information. Enjoy.